So the existential threat is also in regard to a further deterioration of the democratic process. I am convinced, as many of my colleagues are convinced, that the objective of the current administration is to have a situation where the UPND becomes a de facto one-party state. If they win the next elections, I think that the direction they want to take is where they ensure that they tighten all the screws of equal representations in the police, in the army, in the civil service, and others, to make it an impossible situation where the majority groupings as a collective can have a voice in public life in preference for a voice from one particular group. And I mean, this is a fear, okay, that I think that needs to be looked at, and no amount of threat from the government that you are being tribal is going to stop me or anybody else from shouting that there is a possible victimization of others with exclusion. And if they want, I offer them, they can come and pick me up at my house tonight and take me to the jail and charge me with sedition if they want. I will not stop to talk about a behavior from the state which is a threat to the national integrity and democratic process of this country. Because in these elections, and for the behavior of the UPND, which they have demonstrated, the only time that the UPND will be prepared to relinquish power is if the defeat is so clear, undisputable, and there is no confusion. If there is any element of confusion or dispute or a margin of defeat, I can guarantee you that the character of HH and the character of the UPND in their current state is that they will refuse to give up the election, and in fact it gives room for possible manipulation of the electoral process. So that is not a very good strategy to take. So in conclusion, Ambassador Mwamba, these are some of the reasons. I would have liked to have gone through the others because there are equally very important reasons for this.
Watch the entire video, my lovely viewers, to get the whole thing. Without wasting much of your time, let's get right into it.
This is DJ Mutati exclusive.
Hi lovely viewers, it's me again, your one and only Mutati Mpundu. Welcome to my YouTube channel. If this is your first time on my channel, kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel by hitting the subscribe button down below. Turn the bell icon to join the notification squad. Don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment. Tell me what you think about this video in the comment section below. I'll be super glad to hear from you lovely viewers.
Yeah, this gives us a window, like I said, to President Hichilema's approach to national leadership. Earlier I played a video, I don't know if you saw it, but I might play it again, where at the swearing ceremony, he was literally threatening to take the entire state lodge area where it was degazetted, rezoned, and people were given plots. In fact, community house is from Forest 26. Then there's famous Forest 27.
Yeah.
Then there's State Lodge. So I think if he wishes to go that way, probably we should go back to Forest 26 where community house sits. Then we go to community, to Forest 27 where you have senior people like Jack Mwimbu who are also there. If he's being fair about land issues and land distribution or land crisis, probably he needs to go Walsam. And it gives us a view again of why he probably wanted the so-called Bill 13 to amend and give powers, immense powers to an administrator, a junior civil servant, a registrar. And the nation was alarmed, and I'm glad that today in Parliament that matter was deferred. So define for us the state of the country. What do you think is the state of the country?
I can safely say, with a very clear conscience, that if you look at the various events that have occurred in the last 4 months, that the only way that a person would describe what has been going on in our country is that the last 4 or 5 months have been some of the darkest chapters in our country. If we go back to the revelation and the dispute regarding the ZAM stats and what was being announced to the public by the chairman of the Public Service Commission disputing the figures. If you include the enormous betrayal to the Zambian people of trying to bring a constitution which was not consultative and clearly designed to ensure that it consolidates the power of the executive without asking the general public. If you look at the issue to do with the shooting incident in Mufumbe and the people who were killed there, and the lack of policy direction regarding the gold mining in Mufumbe, if you look at the debacle which we have just been discussing, the cruel treatment that has been shown to the Lungu family, if you look at the Cybersecurity Act and all the arrests of sedition that have happened within the last 3 months, clearly you cannot fail to agree with those of us who are saying that the government seems to be exercising all of its powers to manipulate the public in trying to drive the agenda which is beneficial for the President of the Republic and his party, at the sole exclusion of the opposition and the Zambian people. And so, in my many years of being in the political arena, I think that the last 4 or 5 months have been some of the darkest chapters. They have represented, in my view, what I would refer to as an existential crisis to the national state of Zambia. And I think that if we as the opposition don't get together to ensure that this stops by ensuring that we defeat him in the months that are remaining, we will be creating a very dangerous situation which has got the potential of going beyond our control after 2026. So the state of the nation is very bad. And I think that it appears that the government really doesn't care what any of us think, and they are determined to ensure that they stifle the democratic process which we started in this country some 30 years ago.
You worked at Ministry of Finance, you're an economist and you've been a diplomat. I think in the state of the country, I'll bring this question. In 2022, Zambia was classified as one of the 6th poorest countries. On the top 20 of poor countries, Zambia was number 6. And then on income inequality, because you have a few people having a lot of money and the rest of the country very, very extremely poor. So again, Zambia was classified as among those countries that are most unequal. Number 1 is, I think, South Africa. Zambia is again number 6. But there have been some development. The Minister of Finance, Dr. Stumbeko Msokotwane, appointed a very renowned statistician, Mr. Oliver Chinganya. I can attest, I've worked with him very well at the African Union. He was at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. He was one of the 3 top directors there. But there's something strange that is happening. You must have noted the statistics that are coming from there. I think there is an attempt to reclassify our country using either fraud or false statistics. Why do I say so? Look at Zambia. Just last year, we experienced the worst drought in 100 years. We have the worst load shedding, power cuts, I think, which we haven't witnessed in the last 60 years. Businesses have been affected very, very severely. Companies have closed. Big companies can't do numerous shifts, maybe 3 shifts, because they just can't afford fuel or gensets, or, solar is also not very reliable. And then Zambia is experiencing one of the worst cost of living crises, I think, in the last 60 years. Amidst that, check the statistics that have come. That Zambia posted a growth between 6 to 8% just last year. They've even now revised, all the other key indicators. And I saw last week a publication on what is being attributed to World Bank, that Zambia now has jumped, is now a lower middle income, it's no longer among the 20 poorest countries. Using these fictitious figures and the state of our country. I don't know if you have looked at these recent statistics that have, for example, our lifespan has been changed, I think, from 49 now to 67. Tonga language is the most spoken language in the country, and then there's been a sudden revision of key indicators like inflation rate.
Yeah.
Then there's been an attack on the exchange rate. You know, it has appreciated significantly from 28 kwacha to 1. It's now hovering around 23 kwacha. I invite your comment on these matters.
Okay. Let me tackle this from two perspectives. I think because you are basically asking an economic question, but at the same time questioning the statistics that are trying to give us an indication of how well or how bad the economy is doing. So I'll separate them. One of the reasons in which I mentioned the issue of Zamstats as one of the issues which brought all of us together as the opposition is because I think we all realize the importance of statistics, of numbers, of data, because we can only make decisions which are cogent, we can only make decisions which make sense if the data that we are using is reliable and trustworthy. But when a political subtext creeps into the equation, it always creates a doubt in those who are looking at the data. And at that point, it destroys credibility, and none of us can then begin to quote these figures with a level of confidence for which we're supposed to quoting them. Now, I am trained, and I have worked as an economist in the Ministry of Finance, at the Zambia Development Agency, as I said, and at JICA as an economist. And yet, over the last few months, I have refrained from making statements about the economy using figures. There was a time last year in which the president, during an opening of the parliament, boasted that he had a growth rate of, an average growth rate of 5.3% over the last 3 years. And I think he said that in 2012. I wrote a very lengthy article in which I was basically disputing the figures that were being presented to the Zambian people in order for him to arrive at the calculation of 5.3%. And I think that in that article, I proved the case that if you look at the data and the information which was being provided by the Ministry of Finance to parliamentary select committees and to the revisions of the growth figures in terms of projections, actual figures, downgrading of the year, that the story that was being presented about a 5.3 figure was actually inaccurate. I was never responded to by the government. Nobody even made a chance to appeal to them. Beyond, over and above that issue, when the Zamstats was released, the issue of the number of registered voters, which the Electoral Commission had announced that they wanted to achieve, I think they said they had wanted to achieve a 10.5 million people who they are going to register. Again, I raised objections, and I wrote a number of articles disputing the possibilities and probabilities of us reaching 10.5 million registered voters, and how in their projection they felt that we could get a certain number of voter turnout, when the average in this country, if you look at that, all our elections is between 35 and 42% of the population. Again, there was no response to that information. There was a demand in that article from me and others who were demanding that we need to have an external audit of the register before we go to the elections next year. And we as a Zambia, we still demand that there should be a comprehensive external audit of the register so that we are all satisfied that it is above suspicion. That is the second point. The third point is just a snippet of what you've said in regard to the statistical inference that all of a sudden that the Tonga has become the second most spoken language in the countries next over Nyanja. Again, if you look at the growth patterns of all of the various regions and places by which the two languages have been spoken over the last perhaps 4 or 5 census reports, it would give you a trajectory which would make it very difficult for you to come to understand why one particular language group has overtaken another one. Clearly there is a political subtext in this, and there is a way in which you can actually dispute that figure. Now, unfortunately, we have been put in a position where it appears that I would be dealing with this issue because I'm defending my province against the other. That is not the case. In the marketplace, the language that is usually widely spoken, say in the urban areas or even in the local areas, is determined by the general activities of the population. So, for example, if you're going to have music singers who are going to produce music, you will find that the language which is commonly used by the majority of people will be reflected in the language in which the musicians use in order to sell their music. By the same token, you would be able to delineate this by looking and say, okay, the plays that are put on television, what language are they using? Again, that is also a barometer and an indicator of which language the artist feel will have the greatest resonance if you put it. And I can go on in a lot of areas, even advertising. So if you look at the trajectory and the percentages by which each region has grown, and then you look at what the market is telling you, there is clearly a lot of room for you to dispute that particular statistical inference. So the question becomes, why has it become so important that it had to be publicized and indicated that there had been an adjustment in terms of which language is more spoken? And clearly, again, you would come to the conclusion that there is a political subtext to this. Now, when the government begin to politicize data, the danger is that all of us who like to use data as a basis in which to arrive at conclusion begin to mistrust that data. And therefore it becomes very difficult to discuss economic parameters when there is such a disagreement in terms of what is authentic and what is being made up. So that is the one side of it. The second side of this is this. And I want to give a practical example. Even if you were to come to the conclusion that the growth rate of 6% was actually true, in terms of making a determination as to whether the economy is at a place where it ought to be, you would also need to look at other figures from an economic point of view as to whether those figures are affecting the reality on the ground. So you would need to look also at inflation figures. You would also need to look at lending rates in the banking sector. You would also need to look at other parameters to be able to determine whether the growth rate is actually having a positive impact on the population, including the point that you have made earlier on. Growth does not translate into equity of distribution of that growth. But that is an argument for the other day. But the practical example I wanted to give, just 2 days ago, knowing that I was going to come to your show, I wanted to look smart. Of course, I took two of my suits to take them to the laundry, including the one I'm wearing. And I was oblivious. So the last time I took some suits to the laundry, I think was about 3 months ago, and I couldn't remember how much I paid. I took it to Crossroads, and when I gave the two suits, the bill that came to me was $300. I was a bit taken aback, because I do recall that within the last few years that I had come here from the Foreign Service, that the two suits did not cost me $300. The 300 kwacha. That the two suits just 2 years ago, I paid perhaps 150. Okay, so you can see that there has been, in real terms, in as far as the laundry is concerned, there has been a jump of 100%. Now, I've used an example of a middle class, upper middle class individual who is concerned with the suits. But even if you were to take this to the level of just groceries, you will find that a year ago, the price that I was paying for the 1 liter milk that I think everyone buys was 100% cheaper than the way it is costing a year later. So in terms of the actual cost of living, there are even figures which people can do on their own without relying on the central statistics because there is some dispute, which will show you that the cost of living is extraordinarily very high. And that whatever gains that may have been brought about by having an increment in the growth figures have all been wiped out by all the other factors which we will probably need another half hour to look at. So there is no equity between the growth of the GDP per capita as opposed to the real impact it is having on the price of commodities, and on the standard of living of the average person on the street. So that is my reflection on that, in that regard.
Yeah, clearly the data, I think that was my point, is that data appears politicized. As soon as you cannot trust the data, then you've thrown it in the political realm. Zambia Statistics Agency must be so credible that no one must doubt their statistics. In fact, even similarly to the state, you know, that's what even causes the emergence of two parallel markets, one a black one which becomes a genuine market, and the official one. They'll tell you $1 is at this rate, but people are willing to buy it or sell it at another rate. The emergence of another market is forced because your statistics and data is not correct.
And you know, my brother, just to cut you off, that if you look at the history of autocratic governments, if you look at the history of dictators, what you call real dictators, the first thing they begin with is to try and distort the figures and rewrite history and have a situation where the old truth is replaced by a new truth. And that new truth, which is reflective of what the government wants to do in terms of trying to manipulate the minds of the people. So this is a very big issue. I mean, I think that in our country, we often enough reduce the importance of these particular issues for the things which are very clear. What the government is doing is very bad. And I think that we as the opposition, together with the cooperating partners, and even the education institutions like the University of Zambia and so on, should be able to demand for a thorough re-evaluation and an audit of all the figures that are being put forward. I was for the Minister of Finance, and I do know that even the figures that the World Bank and the IMF were using basically were figures which were being given to them by Zamstats, at that time central statistics. Now, of course, I am aware that the World Bank and the IMF also do their own due diligence using some of the same information which Zamstats would collect in order to be able to try and verify. But largely, even the figures from the World Bank and the IMF are dependent on what is legally the provider of legal information in Zambia, being the central statistics. Now, because there has been a dispute, because there is been a suspicion, I think that it is only fair that there has to be some form of due diligence done on all of these figures by independent bodies. This is not to cast any aspersions to the current director or anything like that, but I think that if they want us to have some form of confidence in the figures that are being presented, I think that they owe us that at minimum.
Yeah, about revising history, you know, this reminds me, just last year, I think a new organization, Nobo Harimangankumbula Foundation, was formed. I think it was graced by President Hakainde Hichilema, and the guest of honor was the Chief Justice Mumba Malila. But the talk there was that they were trying to revise history because there were many people who were neglected, who have not been recorded in the history of our country. It's like there was now an attempt to revise our history, just like what you were saying, that autocratic government have a tendency to attempt to write history from their lenses instead of the factual history. ECZ, ECZ is a matter of serious worry. If we've identified the crisis that we face, ECZ will be the midwifery. It will be the midwife to deliver a new government. But you are aware that I think President Hakainde Hichilema, by various international reports and by our own perspective, is being accused of shrinking the democratic space, is being accused of entrenching tyranny in our country. You demonstrated by the litany of oppressive, repressive, and terrible laws that he is passed or is attempted to pass, literally to strengthen the presidency. And then the utter control of institutions like ECZ. The democratic institutions are under threat, and ECZ is one of them. There is cause to worry. First of all, for the first time in our country, the Electoral Commission of Zambia will not be led by a chief judge, by a Supreme Court judge or a High Court judge. It's being led by a lawyer, literally from the street. She could be qualified, but she's not a judge. This has been a significant departure from where the ECZ has been led by a sitting a judge. Secondly, the person appointed, Honorable Mangala Zalumis, has been associated with the UPND. She's literally a member of the UPND. You have McDonald Chipenzi, one of the commissioners. And then you have the Chief Electoral Officer, Mr. Brian Casaro, who there were concerns around his dismissal in 2016 because he was accused of attempting to manipulate results for UPND. With these three key officials, there is great concern if it is possible that ECZ can deliver a free and fair elections in 2026. Then there are concerns around their programs. They're still printing ballots outside the country. I think there appears to be an attempt to introduce either electronic voting, and they've just given a new contract to an unknown company that has never undertaken such works, to a $2.5 million contract to carry works for biometric work for the ECZ. There are clearly serious concerns around ECZ. What's your reflection, and what are you doing about it?
Yeah, I think that it's fair to state that any organization which is playing the role of an umpire or a referee must be above suspicion from the perspective of the players. It has to be above suspicion. Any organization which is an umpire, if there are questions of suspicion, if there are questions of lack of confidence, it is the onus of the government to ensure that that suspicion is removed, and that all of the various components and issues which are being raised by the players, that we don't feel that we can get reliable treatment or justice from this institution, that the government must be compelled to listen. Now, obviously, those of you who know my history a little bit more would know that I have a relationship with Mrs. Alomis, in the sense that I have known her for a long time at a very personal level. When I was as a special assistant for Dr. Kaunda, she was in fact the chairman of legal for UNIP. When I was arrested together with my colleagues, accused of treason and murder in 1996, one of the lawyers who represented me was Mrs. Alomis. In fact, she was the one who was there when I was being charged by treason. So I've known her for a long time. So what I'm saying is not in any way trying to bring her as an individual in disrepute, but the fact that people know that she has had political history in UNIP, in other political parties, as well as in UPND, has created a situation where people have lost confidence. And I think that issue must be looked at from a professional point of view. Again, that is the same for McDonald Chipenzi. During the time that he was very active within the NGO world, I actually sat with Mr. Chipenzi on many platforms, together the two of us, whether it was at Radio Phoenix, whether it was in Monze, we would travel. And of course, there is a view, which is a very legitimate view, from a lot of people who say that these are actually political players. You cannot remove that view which has been arrived at legitimately by people and expect that they will not have levels of suspicion. Beyond that, if then it appears that there are certain issues which are, and decisions that are being made which appears to be at the influence of politicians, for example, Mr. Chawinga, who claims, and we have no reason not to believe his claim, that I have instructed the Electoral Commission of Zambia to ensure that no PF regalias is used, and then there is a statement from the commission that we're not going to do this. Clearly, people put 1 and 2 together. And you can't blame them for, again, arriving at a conclusion of lack of confidence or of suspicion. So clearly, I think that we have to demand, as an opposition political parties, as a collective, that the issue of the Electoral Commission of Zambia has to be resolved to the extent that all of us have got confidence in it, and that the Electoral Commission is above suspicion. That is the minimum criteria. It has to be above suspicion by all of us who are interested in playing and arriving at a fair conclusion to the game of politics. You know?
Let me come to the issue of unity and national unity, then opposition, unity in the opposition. You've been very instrumental in trying to bring the opposition together. I'm aware that you've played a key role. You've met various stakeholders and probably all the leaders in the opposition, even before, the Zambia we want was born. Why do you think that it is inevitable for the opposition to unite? Are you suggesting the opposition is so fragmented, so weak, that it can't stand against President Hakainde's and the UPND? Why is unity in the opposition so critical at this juncture?
Yeah. My brother, the opposition unity is extremely critical at this juncture. But before I go into some of the numbers, because when you invited me, I said, no, this is a good opportunity for us to thoroughly discuss this issue of opposition unity. So I prepared a few notes which I wanted to share with the audience. I want to reiterate the position given that I am a proud member of the Zambia We Want. We are doing everything possible to try and promote our party, even though it is young. But as you correctly put it, many of us who came to form the Zambia We Want, even before we formed it, our initial trajectory was that we should be able to find a mechanism by which we bring in as many opposition political parties as possible to begin to work together so that we can be able to effectively provide checks and balances much more effective as we are doing now, as a collection of very small individual political parties, and that we would be able to effectively challenge the government in 2026 to the extent that we can defeat them. So that was the premise of the Zambia We Want, and I think that as we started it, other things came in, which I think created some sort of loss of trajectory overall. But I think that those issues I can deal with them at another time. Let me get to some of the issues which I think are very important for me to say. And the position is this, my brother. Getting together as a united opposition front, not just UKA, not just all of us, in our view, is an absolute necessity. It is an absolute necessity. And though I'm now saying that this is required, I think that a lot of people are unaware of the underpinnings regarding the statistical information that we have, which would consolidate that position. And I would like to maybe look at just, if you will allow me, to look at 4 reasons why it is absolutely important to have opposition unity. And I'll go, we can discuss each one at a time, okay? The first reason is this. you know. And I say this because I don't think that the supporters and the followers of many of the presidential candidates are fully convinced. I think that it is very important that all of the supporters within the PF, within the Socialist Party, Zambia We Want, ULP, Heritage Party, which we've already been talking, most of us have already been talking, compel their leaders to consider this thing more seriously than they have before. So the first reason is this, and as I said, I have got 4 of them, is that for the first time since 1991, in the elections of 2026, we will not have a contender. As of now, before we have a general election, there is no contender in the opposition. And the definition of a contender is one who has by themselves present a serious threat to the person I would call as the heavyweight champion currently sitting in the seat. Whether we like it or not, the current heavyweight champion of the world is President Hakainde, who is sitting in the seat. All of the other 9 elections, there was always a serious contender. 10 months before the elections, 1 year before an election. So there was Mazoka and Christian Tembo and the others against the candidate of the sitting government, that is Ramanawasa. The following elections, the main contender was Michael Sata, from far apart. The following elections, the main contender was Michael Sata and HH. The following election, the contender was President Lungu. There has always been a contender. For the first time in the next election, as of now, 8 months before, there is no contender. Now, people might say, but there are those people who participated in the elections in 2021. All of those that participated in 2021, no matter what their strengths are, and there's no intention to denigrate them, apart from the UPND and the PF under President Lungu, unfortunately, and you know, due a bereavement, he is no longer there. The rest of the candidates, starting with Harry Kalawa, who was number 3, followed by Anford Banda, were not able to get a minimum threshold of 1%. To suggest that in the absence of opposition unity, that the 3rd place candidate will be able to be a contender to the extent of getting 50+1 is actually a really, really tall order, which is almost an impossibility. Even if you were to assume that President Harry Kalawa, who was number 3, was to increase by 1,000% over what he performed, and there is no empirical evidence to suggest that that is possible, his tally would probably increase from 25,000, 1,000% to maybe 250. That is at best, with the registered voters that is currently there, 5% of the vote. Okay, so it is not possible. The only way, using this particular example, is for all of the opposition political parties to get together, by 70% of the core group, identify a contender. And that contender has to be identified within the next 2 to 3 months, so that you are then running with a contender for the last couple of elections. So that is the first reason that why opposition unity is absolutely paramount.
Continue with your explanation. I'll give you time because this is very important. You've highlighted that, number one, you don't think there's a contender. There's no main contender, you are saying, why there should be opposition. Why there should be unity in opposition, because number one item is that there's no main contender, and you cited the various factors and history of our country. Number 2, you went to
That's right.
the last results, and the last results you stated were very, very clearly that even number 3, the person who came number 3, and the others couldn't even make it to 1%. In fact, the the spoiled votes were in excess of 250,000. The spoiled votes counted more than all the rest of the other candidates. So you are right about that. So you can proceed.
That is right. That is right. And you see, maybe to conclude also on just number one, is that the statistical data is only in reference to those who actually participated in the last election. And of course, I'm discussing concern not as a way of disrespecting any of them, but just looking at the data that is there. From the perspective of the PF, because there are also colleagues, and I respect the PF very much with what they are doing, and also feel a degree of what can I say, of sadness, the fact that they are dealing with the issues they are dealing with, both in terms of the bereavement as well as what the government is trying to do to the PF to ensure that they are unstable. But even from the perspective of the PF, whichever candidate is selected of the candidates which have made their interest known, none of those candidates have been on the ballot before. So it is very difficult to quantify how they would perform the first time in the circumstances in which I have described. One does not want to make an assumption, but what is most probable is that if you look at the figures, and I think we can look at it another day, that the figures in terms of projections of how the PF has performed consistently, say in the last 5 years, would make it a situation that they might perform very well, but unlikely on their own to win. So that is the first.
Thank you very much. I have a system here. It warns me if there is break or poor internet connectivity. So I had yellow warnings, and I didn't want our audience to lose the thoughts that Honorable Muhabi Lungu is explaining. He's explaining the imperatives of an opposition, why we need unity in the opposition. And he has illustrated, he started with point number one. I'll ask him to quickly revise that and update you. And then we'll go to point number two, point number three, then we open the phone lines after that. Let me just briefly resolve the issue of internet. The connectivity is now very wonderful, but I want to now invite Honorable Muhabi Lungu once again. We didn't want to lose any of his thoughts. Honorable Muhabi Lungu, sorry, we got you cut there. I hope you can hear me and you can hear me very
all right. Okay, I'll be quick. I had 5 points, but I can see that you talked about opening the phone line. So maybe let me deal quickly with two, and then conclude with something that I think is very fundamental.
Yes,
so
please go
the second point is this.
Then we open phone lines we have a very dedicated audience that wants to interact with our guests. So I'd like to open the phone lines when you are done, but be thorough with it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so the second point is this. If you look at the history of all elections in Zambia going back to 1991, and you did all various permutations and try to play around the data, what you discover is an undisputable fact that for anyone to win an election, the most feasible path of winning an election in Zambia is that you have to be able to win 3 of the large 5 provinces. So there are 5 provinces which in numerical terms are very key. And that, of course, is Lusaka, Copper Belt, Southern, Northern, and Eastern Province. You have to win a minimum of 3 of these, okay? And you have to win them convincingly. And over and above that, you then go to the other provinces, and in those other provinces, at least 3 of them, in the other 4 provinces, you have to obtain a minimum of 15%, okay? Now, if you look at the performance of the last elections, you had a situation where the UPND won 4 and the PF won 4, but not in consonance to sizes. All of the other opposition candidates, not one of the candidates from the opposition was able to get anywhere close to winning even one province. And if you were to play with all the various stipulations, and me and my team and other colleagues have tried, you find that the probability, even if you were to increase them by enormous percentages, that the chances of any one of us getting to win 3 of the 5 large provinces is nearly impossible as individuals. It is always safer to say, oh no, the UPND are very unpopular, therefore we'll be able to win. That is called conjecture, and there is no empirical evidence at all. And so the best path to ensuring that you win 3 of the large provinces convincingly and then get a minimum threshold in all the other ones is, at this point, the greatest probability is to have 1 ticket. At worst, you have 2 tickets. Anything beyond that, I am afraid that we would be giving the opportunity for the UPND to win. The third point, and I'll conclude with the third point because I'm conscious of the time, and then I want to just conclude with something that is very important. The third point is this, that according to our electoral map as it is now, you have 10 provinces, okay? And as I said earlier in my earlier point, the UPND has consistently been winning 4 of those provinces. And if I had time, I could have even given you a chart or a bar chart or a pie chart to just show what the trend has been. It is unlikely that in the 4 provinces for which they have been winning consistently for the last 5 elections, particularly in the last, that there will be a significant drop. Therefore, the UPND government and President HH will be starting in the next election with probably a ring-fenced figure of above 1.2, 1.3% at minimum. If there is a division in the 4 provinces, which were won by the opposition, and in this case it was all of them was PF, and if you look at the trajectory of those and look at the numbers, you would find that there is a problem there, both in terms of voter turnout as well as the percentage obtained by the winning candidate on those sides. So on this side of the 4, the voter turnout in Southern Province is 85%. Of that 85%, President HH wins 92%. On this side, the province which was number 1 for President Edgar Lungu was, I believe, Mchinga. The voter turnout from Mchinga was 67%. Compare that to 85. And then of that vote that he got 61%. And on the other side, there is 92%. So if you look at all of those trajectory, it gives you the indication that if there is no change in parameters in terms of voter turnout as well as of percentage voter turnout, that a single candidate will not be able to meet the minimum threshold. The only way that can be done is if there is 1 ticket or 2 tickets at most. So that is one of the third issue. Now, there were 2 others, but I will stop there, my colleague, and ask the question. Given all of these empirical evidence that I've given to you, there can only be 5 categories of people who would not come to the conclusion that it is important to have absolute necessity in opposition unity. And these are 5, and I'll just go quickly over them. I would have liked to have explained them in detail, but I know that we're running out of time. So if you do not come to the conclusion which many of us have come to, and many of us have come to that conclusion. I know that my older brother, Dr. Fred Membe, I know that Chishara Kateka, Sakura Shkota, and our colleagues in the PF, a number of them we've been always speaking, have come to this conclusion. But if you are not to this conclusion, you are either, number 1, delusional. I'm sorry to use this very strong word. You are delusional, and that your delusion is bordering on some form of mental illness. That is 1. Number 2, if you are not delusional, then you are using your want to stand as a presidential candidate because it's a financing mechanism for you personally. And I do know, having been in politics for a long time, that there are some youth organizations abroad that will support youth organizations. There are some women organizations abroad that will support women's organizations. There are some organizations who've got specific mandates like LGBT or the Green Party who will put money in elections in order to fight for those particular issues. So you are not doing it because you want to win. You are only doing it because you want to make money out of them. That is true. Thirdly, you are a Trojan horse. And a Trojan horse means that you are either being used by the current government to create and sow division within the opposition, or on behalf of the current government, you are being used by external agents to ensure that you create division. Number 4, you are, and this one is a bit genuine, you are hedging. There are some people who believe that, okay, I may not be able to win this time around, but let me participate as long as I increase my tally maybe from 0.5 to 5%. It's okay. In 2031, I will try it again. That, I suppose, is a legitimate reason for some, and one can't blame you for doing that. However, given the existential threat that we are facing as a people, I think that sort of reasoning is okay, let me just say, is a selfish reason. That what you are thinking about is only your own personal ambition, and you are prepared to put your personal ambitions and the ambitions of your party ahead of the collective when we have got such a crisis in the country. The last category, and I'll stop here, is those people who genuinely believe that no matter what we do in the opposition, that there will be no agreement in terms of coming up with 1 ticket or 2 tickets. That therefore the only way is that because there are too many of us in the opposition which are selfish, we all want to be presidents, we all want to be worshipped, we all want to use the presidents as a vehicle for making money, not for the public, that we cannot submerge our particular ambitions to the ambitions of the country, that this will fail, and in such a case, let every political party just go in it alone. In a situation like that, many people who believe that think that what will happen in 2026 is that because of the unpopularity of the UPND government, that the UPND will fail to get the 3 provinces. You remember the first point I was making was that you need 3 of them. HH was unable to win these elections because since he started, he was unable to get 3 of the big 5. In the last elections, he managed to get the minimum 3, and that was Southern, Lusaka, and Copper Belt. Because of the way the trajectory goes, he is unlikely to win Lusaka and Copper Belt to the extent that he won him last time, meaning 56% for the Copper Belt and 54% for Lusaka. That in a situation like that, he will fail to get the 50+1 in the first round. So that even if there are 2 or 3 contenders on the other side, that we will then be forced into a rerun. And that in a rerun, there will be a forced situation on 1-1, and at that point, maybe the opposition can win. So, but I would like to point out that even if I had time, I would have been able to prove to you with statistics that that is a very dangerous path to take. Because in these elections, and for the behavior of the UPND, which they have demonstrated, the only time that the UPND will be prepared to relinquish power is if the defeat is so clear, undisputable, and there is no confusion. If there is any element of confusion or dispute or a margin of defeat, I can guarantee you that the character of HH and the character of the UPND in their current state is that they will refuse to give up the election, and in fact it gives room for possible manipulation of the electoral process. So that is not a very good strategy to take. So in conclusion, Ambassador Mwamba, these are some of the reasons. I would have liked to have gone through the others because they are equally very important reasons for this. But I think let me conclude at this point and allow us perhaps to move to other areas.
You've given a candid but probably damning assessment, and I like the literal reprimand you've given to all opposition leaders. You've been very candid, and I call it a reprimand because that's what it is. Now, there's a word you have used, I think this is the third time on this program, that Zambia is facing an existential threat. And probably that's why you're even being hard on the opposition, whipping them in unity. What existential threat do we face? Meaning, literally, the life of Zambia is threatened. Our peace and security is threatened. What policies is this man pushing?
Yes.
That you are using such a strong term.
Yeah, maybe I can refer to three of them, Ambassador. Just maybe I can refer to many, but let me just refer to three of them. The first one is as a result of the point I made earlier on at the beginning of the show when you asked me about the state of our country. And I said, never has there been in my participation in the political process of this country where I think that the country is so divided. And the country is so divided basically on ethnic lines. And the president himself, our president, President HH, has been insinuating and promoting that ethnic divide. If you remember, there was a statement in which he was claiming that all his predecessors before him, when they tried to change the constitution, they were never opposed and they were never hated the way he's hated. And he went on to start asking questions on what reason is this HH being hated? What is the question there? What are the issues there? This sort of hate, I can feel it. I can touch it because it's this animal pariah. The insinuations which I've been writing articles on this is clearly an insinuation of self-victimization on the basis of his ethnicity. And he's trying to get a particular group who he thinks will identify with his victimization. Now, that is very dangerous for a country to do. And I think that if we don't put a stop to this by the Zambian people, that it will disturb the integrity of the national state of Zambia, which we have kept for the last 60 years. That is an existential threat. No matter what happens on the economic side, if there's going to be a threat in terms of governance and ethnical issues, then we're in trouble as a country. That is an existential threat. The second existential threat is this. Never has there been such an onslaught on the capacity of the opposition to do its work. Even if you look at the PF, even if you look at the MMD, and my brother, as you know, I have been consistently, in most of my political career, in the opposition. Never have I faced a situation where a political party in government clearly is trying to disturb the main opposition political party. Chawinga actually admitted it in the leaked video. Unfortunately, we haven't had a chance to look at that thing. But that video of Chawinga is proof that the UPND has been actively involved in ensuring that they destroy the main opposition party in parliament and in the councils. And there is no one who can even deny it. His self-confession is very clear. And that has been done to all other political parties, including ourselves. There are certain things as the Zambia we want we've been unable to achieve simply because we know that if we take this particular trade and we have tried it, there has been a blockage. Demonstrations, blockage. Peaceful demonstration, blockage. Peaceful demands for certain protests and meetings to be held, blocked. And we have faced this. So the existential threat is also in regard to a further deterioration of the democratic process. I am convinced, as many of my colleagues are convinced, that the objective of the current administration is to have a situation where the UPND becomes a de facto one-party state. If they win the next elections, I think that the direction they want to take is where they ensure that they tighten all the screws of equal representations in the police, in the army, in the civil service, and others, to make it an impossible situation where the majority groupings as a collective can have a voice in public life in preference for a voice from one particular group. And I mean, this is a fear, okay, that I think that needs to be looked at. And no amount of threat from the government that you are being tribal is going to stop me or anybody else from shouting that there is a possible victimization of others with exclusion. And if they want, I offer them. They can come and pick me up at my house tonight and take me to the jail and charge me with sedition if they want. I will not stop to talk about a behavior from the state which is a threat to the national integrity and democratic process of this country. Maybe let me stop there. As I said, there may have been other factors, but let me give an opportunity to the viewers to have a chance.
Many callers are saying that I should bring you back, and they want those thoughts you're hanging to be completed because they think that you deserve part 2, but that's something we'll discuss.
This is DJ Mutati exclusive.
Alright, that's all for you today, lovely viewers. If you did enjoy the video, please don't forget to leave a comment in the comment section below. Tell me what you think about the video you just watched in the comment section below. I'll be super glad to hear from you, lovely viewers. Once again, I go by the name of Mutati Mpundu. I love you, peace, I gotta go.